Welcome to our broadcast today. I'm Dr. Jayne Gardner, and today what I'd like to discuss with you is a term that I coined several years ago called divine intelligence. You've heard of emotional intelligence, social intelligence. Well, today I'd like to help you understand what divine intelligence is. I think the best way to illustrate this is to tell you a few stories about how I came to coin this phrase and what it is. I'll do that first, but you can also look forward toward the end of this broadcast. I will put some slides, show you some slides that actually give you a written definition of what divine intelligence is, as well as some of the beliefs that we at the Gardner Institute feel are true. So you can look forward to that at the end. If you need to take notes or anything, that might be where you want to. But hey, right now, just settle back and listen to a story or two I have to tell. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I'm really excited about telling you about this. So it all started, as you can imagine, when I was a little girl. So flashback to many years ago. And picture me as a little girl, and in a minute, I'll even show you a picture of me. But one of the first things that I remember happening in my life is I was kind of a rebellious kid, and I remember throwing temper tantrums as a little 4 or 5 year old girl because I didn't want to wear dresses. And back in those days, little girls didn't wear really jeans and things like we do now. So I was stuck, is how I felt about it, really dressing up in these frilly little dresses that I didn't want to wear. I had 2 brothers, and they got to wear jeans even to church. And so I just remember, really kind of doing a holdout one morning and telling my mom I was not going to wear a dress to church. Church was a big part of my life. I grew up in a small town, and church was kind of the social outlet as well as something that was our religion. So I remember one morning, and my mom tells me this story, that we were walking out of church, she and I, we were holding hands as we went down, the many steps down to the bottom to our car. And she said, and I remember this too, I said, "Mom, something is wrong with church." And just as a little girl, I just remember thinking that I couldn't buy into what they were telling me was true. And I knew I was supposed to, but I just couldn't believe some of the things they said. So I remember asking my mom, I said, "Okay, Mom, there's 3 parts. There's the Father, the Son, and the ghost part. But where is the girl part?" And, of course, she was laughing and kind of didn't take it seriously. But for me, I remember thinking, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm a girl. And, I guess I was always a little bit wanting to be more of a boy because I could see that my brothers and my father, you could tell in that world at that time period that boys were more important than girls. So I began to really think, okay, where am I in this big picture of religion? And since they don't have anything that mentions me, maybe it's not good for me to believe this. And so I kind of had some doubts, to say the least. Well, as time went on, I began to kind of give up on being true to myself in a sense. And I began to kind of drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and believe some of the religious beliefs that I was being taught in church. I did have one other hopeful moment that would come up in 4th grade. My mom called us kids into the living room and had us sit on the couch. And she said, she was very excited. She was a big history buff. And she said, "I'm very excited to tell you that there's been a discovery in Egypt. And there has been a notice that there are other books of the Bible other than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John." Well, my mind went immediately to, I wonder if there's a girl book. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all boys. Maybe there's hope here. And she even mentioned that there was books with girls' names on it, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Well, I thought, cool. And I got so excited. She also said that they believed that God wasn't so much a man setting up in the sky, kind of telling us what to do, that these Gnostic Gospels, as they were called, the discovery of these extra books of the Bible, that the believers in these books felt like that God maybe was a feeling like of love on the inside of us rather than a man ruling us. I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I thought to myself, yes, there's hope. I could kind of see now where maybe I do like religion. And I thought, oh boy, on Sunday, the minister's going to talk about this, and there's going to be a great celebration among women that were finally accepted as part of the Bible. Well, as you know, there was no mention on Sunday of these new books, nor has there been mention in any church service I've ever been in since. I don't know about you, but it's like they were just covered up. People just, let it go and didn't think of it as the big excitement that I did and my mother did. So I think it impacted me, and I think I began to get covered up myself. The true me began to just kind of lose contact, and I began to kind of accept that the beliefs about girls and what they should be like are true, as is the belief that there was a man setting up in the sky that was God. And I think I began to accept that as the truth. And I know that I turned into what we now have a term in our process called the pleaser. I began to see that it was to my benefit to just settle back and start pleasing men as well as women. And I began to see that that was to my advantage. I could be a good, sweet little girl and get a lot of benefits from that. And that's what I did. And it worked out pretty well. I made good grades. People liked me. I had friends. All of it went along pretty good, just being this kind of in a sense, a false part of me. But it worked. It worked until I was about 40 years old. And I had been in a marriage for over 20 years where I was a pleaser. And there was an imbalance there because as a pleaser, you're more of a victim, really, or more, you're not as equal to men. And I think I began to accept that women were not equal. So I realized after being married for that long a time, I had 2 children, and it just didn't work for it anymore. I think I began to do what the Gnostics call waking up. I was about 40 years old, and I just began to see that maybe life wasn't the way I thought, and maybe that little girl at 5 or 6 had known more than I did. Maybe I shouldn't have covered up all of that. So I began to explore life a little differently. I got a divorce, and I went back to school to get my PhD because I wanted to see philosophy. I wanted to study things, and I wanted to learn about how people viewed themselves and God. So I got a PhD, and when I got out, I decided I wanted to do a private practice, but I wanted to work some in a mental hospital with some of the most severely ill people so I could really practice and become good. I knew if I could help this kind of person that was really in that bad of shape, I could really be good with anybody. So I did, and for 2 or 3 years, I worked in a mental hospital with that kind of really depressed people. Well, what I found was very discouraging because as I worked with this type of person, I didn't have much luck. In fact, they kept coming back, and I could tell that I wasn't helping them. Maybe I was helping them feel better temporarily, but nobody was sustaining any big change. And frankly, I wanted to be a person that could transform someone and really help them change to the point that they didn't need me anymore. So I began to think, okay, I'm going to think out of the box here. And I thought, what we need, and I need to develop, is a process where people can get back to their true, real selves and really get back to that, because I felt like that when people are born, they still have the divine in them, kind of like the Gnostic says that, people are born connected to God and to the divine. And so why can't we have a process where we go back and reconnect? I worked on it, and I had the perfect laboratory. I had all these people I saw every day, and I practiced, and I did, certain skill sets. I really began to formulate what worked and what didn't work. And the other piece I wanted to put in it was neuroscience. I wanted to base all of the real process that I was pulling together with science, so that it wouldn't be some just, woo-woo spiritual process out there, but a spiritual process undergirded with science, science-based spiritual process is what I wanted. And so as I worked on it, I began to pull together some things, but I could tell it just kind of wasn't coming to life. Well, there are two people that influence the development of this process more than anybody else. And strangely enough, one of them was a child molester, and one of them was a prostitute. I know, but let me tell you the story about Philip. Philip was a client of mine at the mental hospital. And at first, I didn't want to take him as a client. I had a professor that called me and said, would you take this person, because we need somebody to really work with him, especially he's kind of a name in the community and is head of a big corporation. We need somebody that can, really help him change. And when she told me that he had a sexual addiction and had actually gone into stage 4, where people sought prostitutes and molested children and had gotten to that degree of difficulty in the sexual addiction, I said no. I said, I don't want to have anything to do with that person. And I knew that it went against the whole creed and promise I'd made to myself when I became a psychologist, that I would help anyone and try to be non-judgmental about what was wrong with them. So far, I've been able to do that. I knew with a person like this, I could not judge him. I have to be totally transparent. I have 2 daughters, and I had 2 little girls at the time, and I just couldn't get past a man that would hurt a little child like that. And I thought, no, I'm not going to take this person as a client. We even learned in school that sexual addicts were difficult patients, probably the most difficult diagnosis to change, and most of the time they didn't. So I just didn't see that it was a good idea for me to take on this client. I told her no. I guess it was meant to be, because she just really talked me into it and said, do me a favor. And then she also said to me, maybe this is someone you really need to work with. Maybe you need to get past that judgment that she said she could feel I was making. I took him on as a client, and I still just couldn't get past the coldness I felt walking in. It was almost like a fear or a disgust when I saw him. I saw him 2 or 3 times, still felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And I thought, well, I can just sit through this. I don't anticipate him changing anyway. I'll do my professor a favor and kind of sit through the treatment. He'll be released, and there's not much that can be done. One day, something happened so significant that it changed everything. It changed the process, and it changed me. I was talking with Philip, as I'll call this man. I was talking to Philip on about the 3rd or 4th visit, when I'd been there 15 or 20 minutes, when there was a long pause, and he looked at me and he said, Dr. Gardner, he said, do you feel a presence in this room, a third person? And I looked around and, I didn't see anyone, but he kept looking at an empty chair that was kind of sitting over in the dark corner of the room. And I realized he meant that somebody else was here. First, I thought, still in my judgmental attitude, at first I thought, oh no, great. Now I'm not only dealing with a sociopath, I'm also dealing with hallucinations. I guess there was something in me, my divine intelligence came through at that moment because I didn't know really what to do except kind of ignore it. And I looked at him and I just said, Philip, will you move over and sit in that chair and let me talk to that part of you? And he did. And when he moved to that chair, something even scarier than I had ever seen in my mental health work happened. He sat down and then he looked up at me and I said, Philip, try to get in touch with that part of you that is, the sexual addict and so he looked down and when he looked back up, it was evident to me that he had gotten in touch with that part all right. There was the evilest look on his face I had ever seen on a human being. His face was distorted. He almost looked like an animal with teeth kind of flaring, and I can't describe it. It was really scary. It looked like someone out of a movie, a horror movie, and yet it was real, sitting right in front of me. It scared me. We talked for a while, and I asked him, I said, I don't understand why you do all this stuff, like molest children and hurt other people and go to prostitutes. I said, can you explain that to me? Still talking to this really negative part of him. And he began to tell me his story. His story was that as a child, a very small little boy, he had been sexually abused by his father. Not only that, but he had been brutally beaten many times by uncles and men in his life that had treated him very poorly. Something happened to me as I heard his story. I began to empathize and understand Philip. I began to connect to him as I did all my other patients. I began to see that he had been hurt so badly and treated so poorly in his early life that even though I believed everyone was born with this divine in you, that of course it was covered up by all of the evilness that had happened to him. And so as I listened to his story, and he went on and on, story after story, I finally got it. I finally connected and could have some feeling of empathy and love toward him. I asked him after a while to move back to his original chair and to sit close to me so that we could talk, and he did. And when he moved back to that chair, I looked at him with different eyes than I had in the beginning. I saw him as a person that had made mistakes, but that had that truly good part of him like we all do. And so I decided it was it was really a good idea to tell him something. I said, Philip, listen to me a minute. I said, did you know that part, that dark part of you over in the corner was not you? That you're sitting here and you're a good person. It's just that all of that bad stuff has happened to you and you've put on this mask or this false part of you has come about, and it's not you. It's not the real you. This touched something in him, and he began to sob and cry. This grown man couldn't control the sobbing that came out of his chest. You can still see him today, just heaving. And when he was able to talk, he said, I don't know. He said, I don't know how you could feel that way. I don't know how you could see that. And so our work began. And I began to help him see that he too had a true, pure part of him that had just been covered up by all the ugliness of things that had happened to him. And so the process began to emerge to me. I began to see that the job with any of my patients was to help them get back to this original state of being where we all know we're loved and accepted. As my work went on with Philip, I was still, was hoping for that transformation, and I began to see him kind of grasp hold of this other part of him and gain a sense of presence of who he was. But it wasn't until the last day I saw him that I really realized he had made a transformation. I walked in the room the last day and he was about to be dismissed from the hospital. And so I expected to just, say my farewells and everything because I knew he was doing better. But I didn't realize the deep transformation he'd undergone. And so he was waving a journal at me. He had begun to write very deeply during this process of treatment with me, and I encouraged it and saw him really get in touch with himself. But he was waving this journal at me, and he said, Dr. Gardner, do you see the light coming out of this book? Well, I laughed because I remembered when we first met, he had told me how he did not believe in God. He was an atheist and had nothing, in him that could go with all that hogwash, he said. And then all of a sudden, here was this man saying there's light in this book. And so I was laughing too. And I said, well, Philip, what is in that book? And he said to me, well, I didn't share this with you, but several months ago, in my writing in the morning, I started writing to God. He said, because I thought maybe that God was like you had said, he might be inside of me. And so I just started writing to him. And so today, I'm so excited because God, the highest part of me that you've always believed in, wrote back. And he said, I finally connected to it. He said, I'm okay, aren't I? And I said, you really are. That's been 25 years ago. I've heard from him several times since then, and he has sustained that ability to be himself. He went out and established a charity on his own for people that had been abused, and he's just become a beautiful man. Well, he just had gotten back to the beautiful person he always was. This impacted me, and it impacted the development of my process because I realized that in order for people to have this deep transformation I wanted, that I needed to provide them step-by-step process to help them get there. And through working with Philip, I got clear that there are two parts of us that need to be investigated. What I began to call the true part and the false part. And so I saw what could happen, and I began to develop the process. And after many years of trial and error, I came up with what I know now to be a very successful process. So successful that other people wanted to train with me, and I began to get it out into the world. And for 20 years or so, it maintained itself as a truly revolutionary way that people could find themselves. I decided then that I would write a book about the process, and I would just give an example of someone going through it as a way for people maybe that didn't have a chance to take the process to get a little taste of it and see what it was like, because I was beginning to see that the process itself was so revolutionary that if if more people could take it, it could indeed change the world. It gave people that sense of connection to themselves, of love and acceptance for themselves that, took away that hatred and revenge that we all sometimes get into about ourselves and other people. So I knew it was good. I knew it was revolutionary. But when I wrote the book, I wrote it and then I kind of laid it aside. I couldn't decide, if it was worth publishing, really. I think was what I was wrestling with. So I decided, look, you need a break. You've been working hard all these years on this. And so I decided to take a summer off, and my husband and I went to a place I've always wanted to go in southern France. I thought it was a beautiful area, and I just wanted to investigate it and really just relax and not think about work at all, and kind of decide where I wanted to go from there with the process and with the book. Well, then I guess this is when I met the second most influential person to this process, a prostitute. Let me tell you that story. I got to southern France, and after a week or two of just kind of relaxing, I decided I wanted to investigate the historical places around. And little did I know where I really was supposed to go and why I was supposed to go to southern France. Because I discovered there was something called a Cathar trail that you could go and investigate all these different sites. And what this was, it was that there was an early Christian sect that was different than what developed into the Roman Catholic Church. There had been a group of people that followed a different way of viewing Christ's teachings. And yet they had been brutally murdered, and over 1 million people had been killed. In a sense, the church was, I think, threatened by the fact that these people believed that God was on the inside, not some big man up in the sky. So the church saw it as a threat and decided in the Inquisition to just go out and basically kill them all. So I decided to visit these sites where these people had died. And I got to a place called Montségur. It was a very small town, maybe 100 people there. But there was a site there I wanted to see, because on the mountaintop of the site was the last stand for these people, kind of the last stand for the Cathar people. And I wanted to climb that mountain and see what that was like and be up there. So we took a tour, and the mountain was a lot taller and more rigorous climb than I thought. So by the time I got up there, I was exhausted and kind of shaky. And so as I could hear the tour guide talking about these people and how their beliefs were so different than the church, that they were killed, burned at the stake for their beliefs about God being a feeling inside of them rather than an outside force. They believed that there was a capacity within yourself to be holy and divine. It hit me so boldly as relating to what I was doing that I separated myself from the crowd, and I just kind of sat down on the side of the mountain away from the voices of the crowd to relax a little bit and to try to sort out what had happened, to those people and why it was hitting me so deeply. I sat on the side of the mountain, and I had an experience that, as a scientist, that I'd always thought these things happened to other people and they're probably not real, but yet it happened to me. I was sitting there, and it was like all of a sudden a veil lifted, and I was in a different world. It was like a time warp zone where I'd stepped into the Cathar's realm and been back in the 1st and 2nd century. And I felt myself being approached by a woman there, and the woman had a specific thing to talk to me about. And she told me, she said, "Jayne, you have to get your book out. You won't be killed like we were, because the times are different, and now women can be great They don't have to be victims and be second rate. You need to get your process out so that this view of God can change. It's up to you. And she said, your process is the same as the process Christ and I developed at the turn of the century. And the process is about finding and locating the God within you and connecting. And she mentioned so many coincidental things, like our process has a true and false self like yours. It has dialogues. It has the ability to begin to talk back and forth to each other. We believe that knowledge of self is knowledge of God. It was so coincidental that I saw it wasn't. And she talked very gently and softly to me that you have to get this out. And I began to, when you are in that, I guess what I've realized is when you go back to reality, and I thought, I don't even know who this person is, first of all, and I've got to get back. And I went to that view and it all went away. And so I walked down the side of the mountain, and at the time I wanted to forget that. I thought, this is crazy. That didn't even happen. It's what I tried to tell myself for a while. But then it didn't go away, and I kept thinking about it. And so what I decided to do was I thought, it's time for me to start looking at those Gnostic Gospels, those books that weren't published in the Bible. It's time for me to start studying them and seeing what's in them. And so I opened up the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It hit me very emotionally because she was saying exactly what I believed. And then I knew who the woman on the mountain was. It was Mary. The only thing I ever knew about Mary Magdalene was she was a prostitute. And that was my judgment of her. And then I began reading her book of the Bible, so to speak. And I realized she was just different. She just believed something that all of the men in that time didn't believe. And in her book, she tells a story about that she and Peter were the two authorities, the leaders, after Christ died, and that she believed a certain way that we have a purpose in life to find and develop this God within us, and that Peter thought that God was an entity out of self and that you were supposed to worship that part. And of course, history, I guess, is written by the winners, so Peter won out. But I began to realize that this was what I believed, and that maybe I had been singled out to get this process out. The main thing I think I got was that Mary showed me it was time for me to find the true self within me, the divine within me. And that even though I had helped all of these people, for 20 or 30 years, and I had seen them flourish and sustain this change, this transformation, but yet I hadn't really felt it in me. It was so easy to help other people. But I realized it was time to accept my own greatness. And that in itself contained so many negative messages that even as I say it here to you today, I feel like, it's so difficult to say that you yourself have greatness in you. It's much easier to see yourself as just an ordinary person. But I knew that all the people I'd seen and helped, I didn't see them as ordinary people. I saw them as, once they grabbed hold of this greatness within them, that they could create their own life, that they could do whatever they were supposed to do in this world. And that indeed it was time for me to accept who I was. And so that's what I've been doing over the past year or two since my trip back from Montsegur, France, is I've been trying to integrate the fact that I am the one that's supposed to get this message out to the world. And so I want to show you what my belief system is now that I've had time to sort through it and read some of the Gnostic Gospels. I'm going to show you what I've come up with, because I think I have a whole new revolutionary view of God that maybe it would suit you. I don't know, because one of our beliefs, of course, is that we have no judgment for any view of God. And so if it doesn't fit you, as you read these slides I'll show you, let go of it and know that your view may sustain you and provide you with exactly what you need. But for me, I needed something different. And I've found that there are many people that need something different. I'll see if you're one of those people. Let me pull up some slides for you and show you what I'm talking about. I want to tell you kind of about what divine intelligence is. I had to show you this picture of myself. This was kind of after I think I converted back to my false self. You can tell that I succumbed to wearing the dresses and to buying into the fact that I was a little girl, but you can also tell by the expression on my face that I wasn't too pleased. Somehow, I think I still wanted to be like my brothers. They could wear pants, and that's really what I wanted. But I began to be that girl, kind of like covered up my own potential with that dress. But then I found the Gnostic Gospels, and so here's a book by Elaine Pagels that I first read about the Gnostic Gospels. And the Gnostic Gospels are really a collection of about 54 ancient texts based upon the teachings of several spiritual leaders, one being Mary Magdalene, one being Philip, Thomas. But they were written from around the 2nd to the 4th century, the exact time that the books of the Bible were written. They had just not been accepted when the cut was made, and the Gospels had been buried until they were found about 50, 60 years ago. Here's my book. I wanted you to see what it looked like, Divine Intelligence, because I figured out a scientific system for awakening the God within you. Of course, you realize I had to awaken it within me first. But here's what we believe at the Gardner Institute about the divine. Our 12 basic beliefs. The first one is, like I had mentioned, we accept and are non-judgmental of other people's paths to God. We see all people as equal, regardless of religious faith, sexual preference, income level, or any other state of being, even being a prostitute or a child molester. We see as it's necessary to be non-judgmental to all people. We believe that the divine is within you and is defined as our unlimited potential, our divine intelligence, as I've labeled it. So what we say divine intelligence is, it's a state of divine consciousness. It's eternal, it lasts forever, it doesn't ever die, it's unlimited, and can never be taken away from us. I think love is one way of an example of a state of divine intelligence. Science even proves to us that there's the divine within. There's scientists that have proved there's light in the human body. Like we always think of religious leaders as being surrounded by light and halos and kind of a godlike light being around them. Well, there's light in you and me too. And the more light we have, the more healthy we are. As our light dims, we get sick. So there's something to this idea of having light within us that makes us divine. We were also born with a brain that has an unlimited capacity to develop. Scientists call it ipseity, is the word they use to describe that unlimited potential. And then scientists have discovered that we can live forever. Now, they don't know how yet, obviously, but there are scientists who have taken the human cell and made it go on and seen that it will never die. all sorts of research out there. And sometimes we're not privy to it because it seems so outlandish, I guess, doesn't it? But we also know in neuroscience that we can rewire our brain cells and even change our genes now. New research out. I love neuroscience. And so a lot of my process is based on those scientific discoveries. We also know at death that our material body will be gone, but our spiritual self will return to the highest level of our divine intelligence and will go on forever. Our fourth belief is that instead of a big man up in the sky, that the divine could be better described as a big mind, divine intelligence, in which we are all a part. We call this the mind of God, or the universal divine intelligence. That's everybody's divine intelligence combined. And as this mind of God is the unlimited source within us all, then we are all a reflection of the source, and therefore we're all connected. We have a spiritual law that reads, to sum it up, we're all one. And what Mary had told me is one of our beliefs. Knowledge of self is knowledge of God. We develop our divine within, instead of thinking we should worship a divine force outside of us. The divine for us is embraced as not who we seek, but who we can be. To know oneself at the deepest level is to know the divine. We are responsible for everything that happens to us. And we know in science that our spiritual thoughts and feelings create material reality. The science of quantum physics has shown us that what we think about comes about. So our spiritual law reads, as within, so without. As we develop who we are and begin to change our belief system, we are more able to create just the life we want. We believe there's two states of consciousness: the conditional self, or what we might call sometimes the false self. This is a state of consciousness where we're not evolving forward to find God within us. That would be called our human self. And then we have we believe is the authentic or true intentional self, which is a movement toward the divine within us. So we think of the divine as an activity within us, a movement toward our innate goodness and unlimited potential. Our mindset spiritual process is one way to move toward our innate capacity, divine intelligence. The secret to being in our divine intelligence is to harness the energy of our emotions, not to blame or to hold resentment or anger to self or others, but we believe that negative emotions, if not processed, become buried inside your brain, and that keeps you at a very low level of divine intelligence. Our ultimate goal in our process is to harness the energy of our highest emotions, of love, gratitude, and peace. Our spiritual law reads, buried emotions never die. Our last belief is that the highest level of divine intelligence occurs when the mind is perfectly balanced between the feminine and the masculine, or the right and left hemisphere. So we're looking at a balance there, a horizontal balance between hemispheres, but our process also integrates vertically. And we found in neuroscience that we can integrate the masculine and feminine by balancing the feeling brain with the thinking brain. And what I believe is that Mary Magdalene and Christ are examples of people, both the feminine and the masculine, are examples of people who have found the divine within and developed it. But there can be spiritual leaders of other religions or spiritual persuasions that are examples of what we can all become, but they're not exceptions. They're just examples of what we can become when we decide to do our own work on ourselves. 11. Spiritually, the development of the divine within does not require salvation, but rather accepts our inherent divine nature. So our spiritual goal is something we call transcendence, to rise above our human or conditioned selves and become our true divine selves. And last, we believe that heaven is possible right now in this moment on this earth. Heaven is a state of mind, a consciousness of our divine intelligence. It's not a place you go to after death, but it's a state of mind that you can have right now. And our spiritual law reads, everything begins with you. So our mission at the Gardner Institute is to help everyone in the world uncover their inner divine intelligence and to grow the universal divine mindset to a higher level of love and acceptance and non-judgment. Our process, our mindset spiritual process, based on science research, gives people one way to move toward this divine intelligence. We would like to get this process out to more people, to as many people as we can, to help the complete universal mindset of all of us change to a higher level. I would love to hear from you. In fact, I need your help. I need your help to get this out. I need your ideas. I wish you would email me with anything that has come to you during this whole presentation that you'd like to share with me. Maybe you have ways that you think you could help me, or ways that things that you believe that might be important to us too. But I would like to take this opportunity to just ask you to join us in our cause. I can't do it all by myself. I need more people involved with this. I need more ideas. I need more creativity. And I know there's people out there that are like me, that are looking for ideas of other ways to think of the divine and other ways to develop yourself. Contact me at this email, and I'm just hoping that in doing that, we can grow the mission and get it to more people. I just love to hear from you. So send me emails. Or you can visit us at our website, gardnerinstitute.com. I'd just love to have you join us. So if you visit our website and you see things on it that you would like to be a part of, let us know. I wrote the book and I decided to publish it, and it's out there. And it is a great way for you just to investigate and see more about what we're doing. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. Thank you for the time that you've spent in listening to me. And I hope that your divine intelligence has increased because of this broadcast. Thank you.